When a badge gives you the right to shoot my innocent sister by mistake, you either pack your bags for hell immediately or pray her brother is not a Navy SEAL. These absolute cowards thought they could delete her life like browser cache and bury the truth in a shallow grave, but they had no idea I was coming home with 30 hammers ready to smash their corrupt little world into jagged pieces. The way their precious law turned into a total chaotic circus made the entire town hold its breath in pure terror. But let us rewind to the exact second my phone turned into a grenade without a pin. My name is Marcus, and I'm 26 years old. If you saw me walking down the street, you would probably think I am just another guy who spends too much time at the gym and wears way too much tactical gear, but the reality is much more intense. I am a member of the United States Navy SEALs. My entire life is built around precision, discipline, and the kind of high-stakes pressure that would make most people's heads spin like a carousel on fast forward. I have spent years training to be the person who runs toward the danger while everyone else is running away. I have survived things that sound like they belong in a big-budget action movie, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my phone vibrated on that cold metal table in the cafeteria at our base in Virginia. The heat in Virginia that day was completely unhinged. It was the kind of humidity that sticks to your skin like a desperate ex-boyfriend, making every breath feel like you are inhaling warm, wet wool. I was sitting there, trying to enjoy a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through a dirty gym sock, surrounded by the constant hum of industrial air conditioners that sounded like they were on the verge of a total emotional breakdown. My mind was on my next training cycle, thinking about deep-sea insertions and urban warfare tactics. I was in the zone. I was untouchable, or so I thought. Then the phone started buzzing. It was the aggressive, jagged vibration that cut through the monotonous chatter of the mess hall. I saw the caller ID. Mom. My heart did a weird little skip beat. My mom does not call me at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday unless the world is literally ending or she found a really good coupon for frozen pizza. I picked up expecting to hear a joke or a story about the neighbor's cat. Instead, I heard a sound that will be burned into my brain until the day I die. It was a scream, a raw, ragged, soul-crushing sound of pure agony and terror. Marcus! Oh my goodness, Marcus, you have to come home right now. They shot her. They shot Maya. The world around me did not just stop. It shattered into a million jagged pieces. For a second, I could not even breathe. My sister Maya is 28 years old, and she is the absolute light of my life. She is a librarian who spends her weekends volunteering at animal shelters and teaching kids how to read. She's the kind of person who is so wholesome it is almost annoying. The kind of person who would apologize to a piece of furniture if she bumped into it. The idea of someone shooting Maya was so completely ridiculous, so entirely outside the realm of reality, that I thought for a moment I was having a heat stroke-induced hallucination. This is straight up the most insane thing I have ever heard in my entire life, no cap. Mom, slow down. What do you mean? Who shot her? Where is she? I asked, my voice dropping into that low, dangerous tone I use when a mission is going sideways and people need to start following orders immediately. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, but out of a sudden, volcanic surge of adrenaline that made me want to punch a hole through the nearest brick wall. As my mom sobbed out the details, the picture started to become clear, and it was uglier than a trash fire in the middle of July. It started with a traffic stop. Maya was driving home from the grocery store, probably listening to some upbeat podcast about knitting or historical mysteries, when she saw the flashing lights of a police cruiser in her rearview mirror. She pulled over immediately. She is a rule follower. She does not have a rebellious bone in her body. She did everything the right way. The man who pulled her over was Officer Derek Vance. He is 42 years old, and from what I gathered later, he is basically a walking advertisement for why some people should never be given a badge or a gun. Vance has the kind of reputation in that town that makes people cross the street when they see him coming. He is a power-tripping, ego-inflated nightmare who treats the public like they are his personal punching bags. He walked up to Maya's car with his hand already on his holster, looking like he was expecting a full-on shootout, instead of a polite young woman with a trunk full of organic kale and almond milk. Vance's partner was Officer Miller, a 35-year-old guy who is basically a professional yes man. Miller stood by the passenger side, looking bored, while Vance started barking orders at Maya like he was a drill sergeant, and she was a recruit who had just insulted his mother. License and registration. Keep your hands where I can see them. Do not move, Vance yelled, according to the witnesses who were watching from a nearby sidewalk. Maya was terrified. You could see it in her eyes on the grainy footage that surfaced later. She was shaking, her voice trembling as she told him, "Officer, my license is in my purse in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it now. Please do not be alarmed." She narrated her every move. She was being as transparent as a glass of water. But Vance was not interested in safety. He was interested in a confrontation. He was looking for an excuse to be the tough guy. As soon as Maya's hand touched the latch of the glove box, Vance snapped. He did not think. He did not evaluate, he just reacted with the kind of mindless violence that only comes from deep-seated prejudice and a total lack of emotional control. He screamed, "Weapon!" at the top of his lungs, which is completely outrageous because the only thing in that glove box was a map, some napkins, and Maya's wallet. And then he pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot was a sharp, disgusting crack that echoed through the quiet street. The bullet went through the window and tore into Maya's shoulder, missing her vital organs by mere inches, but causing the kind of damage that changes a person forever. Her white summer dress, the one she was so excited to wear because it was finally warm enough, was instantly soaked in a deep, dark crimson. She slumped over the center console, a look of pure, unadulterated shock frozen on her face. And do you know what Vance did? He did not call for a medic. He did not try to stop the bleeding. He stood there, still pointing his gun at her unconscious body, screaming at her to get out of the vehicle and show him her hands. It was a level of cruelty that I cannot even begin to describe without wanting to scream. That is just straight-up demonic behavior for real. Miller, the partner, did not step in to help either. Instead, he reached up and fumbled with his body camera, accidentally turning it off right as the situation became a crime scene. Standing there in the cafeteria listening to my mother's heart-wrenching cries, I felt a cold, sharp blade of ice slide into my chest. This was not just a mistake. This was a systemic failure. This was a man with a badge thinking he could hunt my sister like she was nothing. I looked up and saw my commander, Captain Grant, watching me from across the room. He is 45 years old, a veteran of more wars than most people can name, and he knows exactly what it looks like when a man reaches his breaking point. He walked over, his face unreadable, but his eyes full of a grim understanding. "Marcus," he said, his voice quiet, "what is the situation?" "The situation, Captain, is that the law just declared war on my family," I replied, my voice sounding like it was coming from a million miles away. I told him everything. I told him about the stop, about Vance, about the blood on the dress, and about the fact that they were already trying to frame my sister as a dangerous suspect to cover their own backs. The audacity of these people is honestly off the charts. They thought they could pick on a woman who had no one to stand up for her. They thought they could just delete some footage, tell a few lies to the local press, and go back to their donuts like nothing happened. They had no idea that Maya's brother was trained by the most elite military force on the planet. They had no idea that I have brothers, 30 of them to be exact, who would walk through fire and brimstone if I asked them to. "Go," Captain Grant said. He did not ask for paperwork. He did not tell me to follow the chain of command. He knew that what was coming was not a legal matter anymore. It was a matter of honor. Take whatever you need. Bring her justice, Marcus. That is an order. I walked out of that cafeteria and did not look back. I went straight to my quarters, grabbed my gear, and made one phone call to a private, encrypted line that only a few people in the world even know exists. "This is Marcus," I said to the voice on the other end. "I have a priority 1 situation in my hometown. The target is a corrupt police precinct that just shot my sister and is trying to bury the evidence. I need the team. I need 30 hammers ready to drop at my signal. We are going to show these people what happens when you mess with the wrong family." The voice on the other end did not hesitate. "Say no more, brother. We are already gearing up. Give us the coordinates. We will be there before the sun goes down tomorrow. Let's get it." As I drove toward the airport, the rage inside me was no longer hot. It was a cold, calculated, professional fury. I was not just a brother anymore. I was a Navy SEAL on a mission of retribution. Derek Vance and Chief Walters were about to find out that when you pull the trigger on an innocent person, you sometimes pull the pin on a grenade you cannot throw away. This is going to be a total nightmare for them, and I'm going to enjoy every single second of it. I am currently 5 hours away from home, and the air feels like it is vibrating with the promise of what is to come. They think they are the law. They think they are the ones in control. But they are about to learn that in the real world, when you push the wrong person, the main character shows up with 30 friends and a very specific set of skills. What in the actual world were they thinking? They really thought they could get away with this? Not on my watch? Not ever? The drive from the airfield to my hometown felt like descending into a very specific, very humid circle of heck. I was behind the wheel of a charcoal gray rental SUV, the kind that blends into the background so perfectly you forget it exists, which was exactly the point. My knuckles were white as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind replaying my mother's voice on a loop. Every time I closed my eyes for a split second, I saw that white dress, Maya's favorite summer dress, soaked in a color that no brother should ever have to see on his sister. The town itself looked the same, which was the most frustrating part. The oak trees were still drooping with Spanish moss, the sun was still beating down on the cracked cracked pavement, and the local diner was still serving world-famous cherry pie to people who had no idea that a war was about to land on their doorsteps. It felt like I was walking through a movie set where everyone was an extra and I was the only person who had actually read the script. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of cut grass and diesel fumes, a scent that usually meant home, but now it just felt like the smell of a crime scene that had not been cleaned up yet. I pulled into the parking lot of the hospital, a beige, blocky building that looked like it was designed by someone who genuinely hated the concept of joy. The air inside was a brutal contrast to the heat, blasting cold, smelling of industrial-strength bleach, and that weird, metallic scent of a place where people are fighting to stay alive. I walked through the sliding glass doors, and my tactical boots made a sharp, rhythmic clicking sound on the linoleum that said, "I am not here to make friends." I found my parents in the waiting room. They looked like they had aged 20 years in the last 24 hours. My dad, a man who once built houses with his bare hands, looked small in that plastic chair. My mom was clutching a damp tissue like it was a lifeline. When they saw me, the relief on their faces was so intense it almost knocked me over, but underneath that relief was a mountain of sorrow. "She is in room 402, Marcus," my dad whispered, his voice sounding like gravel. "They will not let us see her for long. They say she is stable, but—" He did not have to finish the sentence. I walked down the hallway, past nurses who looked overworked and patients who looked defeated, until I reached her door. I took a breath, trying to shove my operator persona into a box so I could just be a brother for a minute. Maya looked so tiny in that massive hospital bed. Her shoulder was a mountain of white gauze and tape, and her face was the color of a fresh sheet of paper. Seeing her hooked up to all those machines, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, the hiss of the oxygen, made something inside me turn into liquid nitrogen. It was a cold, hard, unyielding weight. This was not a mistake. This was not a split-second decision. This was what happens when a coward with a badge thinks the world is his personal firing range. I sat there for a long time, just holding her hand, which felt way too cold. "I am here, sis," I whispered, "and I promise you the people who did this are going to wish they had never even heard our last name. That is a promise. No cap." I stepped out of the room an hour later, and that is when I saw it. There was a television in the waiting room, tuned to the local news. The headline scrolling across the bottom made my blood pressure skyrocket. "Local police investigate officer involved. Shooting, suspect's background under scrutiny." The news anchor, some guy with way too much hair gel and a suit that cost more than his integrity, was talking to Chief Walters. Walters, the 58-year-old puppet master of this whole clown show, was standing in front of the precinct, looking concerned for the cameras. "It is a tragedy whenever a weapon is discharged," Walters said, his voice dripping with that fake, practiced sympathy that politicians use. "But we have to remember that our officers are under immense pressure." Officer Vance observed several red flags, including erratic driving and a failure to comply with commands. "We have also recovered evidence from the vehicle that suggests the driver may have been involved in illegal activities." I stood there, staring at the screen, my hands trembling with the sheer audacity of the lie. They were literally planting the seeds for a smear campaign while my sister was still unconscious. They were going to turn her into a criminal to justify their own incompetence. It was the most sus thing I had ever seen in my entire life, and I have seen some pretty shady things in Third World War zones. "Are you for real right now?" I muttered to the empty hallway. I did not go back to the hotel. I did not go home to get a home-cooked meal. I walked straight out to my SUV and put the address for the local precinct into the GPS. It was time to introduce myself. The precinct was a squat brick building that looked like it had been built in the 70s and never updated. It had that "we are the kings of this town" energy, with police cruisers parked at haphazard angles and officers standing around the entrance laughing like they were at a backyard barbecue instead of a place of business. I parked my car right in the authorized personnel-only zone. Let them try to tow it. I wanted them to. I walked through the front doors and the bell chimed with a cheerful little ding that felt completely out of place. The air inside smelled like stale coffee, old paper, and a hint of floor wax. Behind the bulletproof glass sat a desk sergeant who looked like he had spent the last 30 years eating nothing but resentment and powdered donuts. "Can I help you, son?" he asked, not even looking up from his paperwork. "I'm here to see Chief Walters," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. The sergeant finally looked up, squinting at me. He probably saw the haircut, the posture, and the "do not mess with me" eyes, because his attitude shifted slightly. "The chief is in a meeting. You have an appointment?" "Tell him Marcus Harris is here," I replied. "Tell him I am Maya Harris's brother. And tell him that his little news segment was the most creative piece of fiction I have seen all year. I will wait." The sergeant's eyes widened a fraction of an inch. He picked up the phone, whispered something into it, and then looked back at me. "He will see you in 5 minutes. Take a seat." "I will stand," I said. While I waited, two officers walked past me, whispering to each other. One of them was Officer Miller, the 35-year-old partner who had stood by while Vance shot my sister. I recognized him instantly from the news photos. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of pure, unadulterated guilt in his eyes before he looked away and hurried into the back room. He knew. He absolutely knew they were lying. Finally, the door to the inner offices opened, and Chief Walters stepped out. He was trying to look imposing, but I could see the sweat on his upper lip. He knew who I was, he knew what I did for a living, and he knew that I was not some 20-something kid he could bully into silence. "Mr. Harris," he said, holding out a hand that I absolutely did not take. "I am so sorry about what happened to your sister. It is a terrible situation, truly." "Save it, Walters," I said, stepping into his personal space. "I watched your interview. I know you are lying. I know there was no weapon. I know there were no drugs until your boy Vance put them there. And I know you deleted that footage. What I want to know is how you plan on fixing this before it gets out of hand." Walters' face hardened. He dropped the nice guy act faster than a hot potato. "Listen here, son. I understand you are upset, but you are talking about an active investigation. We follow the facts, and right now, the facts do not look great for your sister. You should be careful about making accusations you cannot prove. This is my town. I suggest you go back to the hospital and stay out of police business." "Your town?" I let out a short bark of a laugh that had zero humor in it. "That is adorable. You think because you have a gold star on your chest, you are the apex predator here? You have no idea what is coming for you, Walters? You really think you can just bury this? You are playing a game you do not understand with people you are not equipped to handle." "Is that a threat?" Walters asked, his hand drifting toward his belt. "It is a spoiler," I replied, leaning in so close I could smell the peppermint he was using to hide his anxiety. "You have 24 hours to release the real footage and drop the charges against my sister. If you do not, I am going to bring a level of scrutiny to this department that you cannot even imagine. I'm not talking about a lawyer, Walters. I'm talking about a reckoning. For real." I turned around and walked out of that building without waiting for a response. The air outside felt a little cooler, or maybe that was just the adrenaline beginning to plateau. I got into my SUV and pulled out my phone. I saw a notification on my encrypted messaging app. "Ghost, this is Hammer 1. We just touched down at the private airfield 20 miles north of your position. All 30 operators are accounted for. We have the gear, we have the drones, and we are ready to move on your command. What is the status of the target?" I looked back at the precinct in the rearview mirror. It looked so small, so fragile. They really thought they were the big dogs because they could bully people at traffic stops. They had no idea that 30 of the most highly trained special operations soldiers in the world were currently unpacking gear just a few miles away. "Target is uncooperative," I typed back. "They are doubling down on the lie. We are moving to phase 2. I want eyes on every single one of them. I want to know what Walters eats for breakfast. I want to know where Vance is hiding. And I want the digital team to start cracking their server. They think they deleted that footage? Show them that nothing is ever really gone. Let us get it." I put the car in gear and drove away. The sun was starting to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the road. The main character had arrived, and the clown show was about to be canceled. They thought they could silence one innocent woman. They didn't realize she had an army. I headed back to a secure location I had scouted earlier, an old warehouse on the edge of town that belonged to a friend of the family. It was perfect. High ceilings, plenty of space for the team, and far enough away from the prying eyes of the local cops. As I pulled up, I saw the first of the blacked-out transport vans pulling into the lot. My brothers were here. The back doors of the van opened, and out stepped Jax, a 30-year-old heavy weapons specialist who could probably lift a car if he tried hard enough. He had a grin on his face that was purely predatory. "Hey, Ghost," he said, tossing me a high-end tactical headset. "I heard we are here to remind some people about the difference between a badge and a backbone. Is that right?" "That is exactly right, Jax," I said, looking at the team as they began to file out of the vans. 30 men, every one of them a master of their craft. We are going to give this town a lesson they will never forget. No one touches my family and gets away with it. Ever. High key, this is going to be the worst day of their lives. We started setting up the command center. Monitors were being flicked on. Drone feeds were being established, and the sound of weapons being checked and loaded filled the air. It was a rhythmic, mechanical symphony that signaled the end of the peace. Walters and Vance were sleeping in their beds right now, thinking they were safe. They had no idea that the boogeyman was real, and he brought 30 of his best friends to the party. What on earth were they thinking? They really thought they could just shoot an innocent girl and walk away? Not on my watch. Not in this lifetime. The clock is ticking, Walters, and you are about to run out of time. The air inside the warehouse was thick with the scent of ozone, gun oil, and high-end electronics. My name is Marcus. I am 26 years old, and if you had walked into this building tonight, you would have thought you accidentally stumbled into a secret government facility or the lair of a very well-funded movie villain. But this was not a movie. This was a professional operation. I stood in the center of the room watching the monitors flicker to life. Around me, 30 of the most capable men I have ever known moved with a quiet, lethal efficiency that would make a ghost look loud. In the corner, Leo was working his magic. Leo is 27 years old and is the kind of digital wizard who could probably hack into a toaster and turn it into a satellite array if he was bored enough. He sat surrounded by 4 ultra-wide monitors, his fingers dancing across a custom mechanical keyboard with a rhythmic clicking that sounded like a swarm of angry cicadas. "Talk to me, Leo," I said, leaning over his shoulder. "What do we have on the clown show at the precinct?" Leo did not even look up. He had that main character energy going full blast. "Marcus, honestly, calling their digital security a system is an insult to systems everywhere. They are basically using a password that is probably password 123 or the chief's dog's name. I'm already deep in their local server. It is like walking through a door that was not only unlocked, but wide open with a welcome mat in front of it. It is straight up embarrassing. For real?" "Did you find the footage?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. This was the only thing that mattered. The chief thought he was being a genius by hitting delete, Leo said with a sarcastic snort. "But as we always say, nothing is ever truly gone on the internet. He did not even scrub the cache. I am currently running a recovery protocol. I would say we are about 15 minutes away from having the full, unedited video of Officer Vance making the biggest mistake of his life. By the way, I also found some very interesting emails between Chief Walters and a local developer. It turns out that illeted guarded parking lot they wanted to build over the community garden had a lot of zeros attached to it in the form of kickbacks. The audacity is honestly off the charts." While Leo worked the digital front, Jax and the rest of the team were preparing the physical surveillance. Jax is 30 years old, built like a brick wall, and has a sense of humor that is darker than a black hole. He was currently calibrating a swarm of micro-drones, devices so small and quiet they look like large dragonflies in the dark. "Drones are up, Ghost," Jack said, handing me a tablet. "We have eyes on the target. Officer Vance is currently at home, sitting on his porch like he does not have a single care in the world. He is probably thinking about what he is going to buy with his next paycheck while my sister is lying in a hospital bed. It makes me want to do something very, very loud, but I know we are going for the psychological play first." I looked at the screen. The thermal feed showed Vance in high contrast. He looked small. He looked weak. He had no idea that he was being watched by people who could end his whole career with a single keystroke. "Start the glitches," I ordered. "I want him to feel like his own house is turning against him. I want him to question his own sanity before we even knock on his door. Let us get it." Leo grinned, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. "Oh, this is my favorite part. Switching to his smart home interface now. By the way, he has a very expensive sound system. It would be a shame if it started playing things he did not want to hear." 15 miles away, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Officer Derek Vance was trying to relax. He had a glass of lukewarm tea in his hand and was staring at his television, which was muted. He felt untouchable. He had the chief in his pocket. The local media was playing along with the story, and he figured that in a month everyone would forget that he shot a librarian. Suddenly, his television flickered. The screen went black for a split second, and then a video started playing. It was not the news. It was a high-definition recording of the traffic stop. It was the footage from the Ring camera across the street. The footage, he was told, had been destroyed. Vance froze. He watched himself walk up to Maya's car. He heard his own voice screaming commands. He watched Maya's terrified face as she slowly reached for her glove box, exactly like she said she would. And then he saw himself fire. The sound of the gunshot blasted through his surround sound speakers at maximum volume, making the windows rattle. What the absolute heck? Vance scrambled for the remote, but it did not work. He tried to unplug the TV, but the video just hopped to his tablet on the coffee table. Then his phone started buzzing. Every single contact in his phone was sending him the same message. "We see you." He ran to his kitchen to grab his service weapon, but as he entered the room, the smart lights began to strobe in a frantic, disorienting pattern. Red and blue, mimicking the police lights he had used to trap Maya. "Who is doing this?" Vance screamed at the empty air. He was sweating now, his tough guy facade crumbling faster than a cheap sandcastle in a hurricane. Back at the warehouse, we were watching the whole thing through the drone's thermal and infrared cameras. It was like watching a trapped animal realize the cage was getting smaller. "He is losing it, Marcus," Jack said, his voice full of a cold, jagged satisfaction. "Look at him. He is literally shaking. It is the most beautiful thing I have seen all week. No cap." "Do not stop," I said. "Leo, divert all his incoming calls to a loop of Maya's voice from the hospital. I want him to hear her every time he tries to call the chief. And speaking of the chief, what is Walters doing?" Leo tapped a few keys, bringing up a different feed. Chief Walters was in his home office, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. He was on his landline, the only thing Leo hadn't fully compromised yet, screaming at someone. We intercepted the audio from the landline bridge, Leo said, clicking a button. I do not care what it costs. Walter's voice filled the warehouse. And get those files off the server. If that footage gets out, we are all going to prison. And find out who that guy was at the precinct today. The brother. He's not just some kid. He looked like he wanted to eat my soul for breakfast. Get a background check on him now. Too late, Chief, I whispered to the screen. Marcus, Leo said, his voice turning serious. The recovery is complete. I have the raw, unedited body cam footage from both Vance and Miller. Miller did not turn his off as fast as he thought. I have the audio of them talking right after the shooting. You need to hear this. The room went silent as Leo played the audio. Dude, what the flip did you do? Miller's voice was shaky, panicked. She didn't have a gun, Vance. There's nothing in there. Shut up, Miller. Vance's voice was a snarl. I saw a gun. That is the story. Grab the bag from my trunk. The special one. We are going to put it under the seat while the medics are busy. If you say a word to anyone, you are going down with me. You understand? This is my town. We protect each other. The silence that followed the recording was heavy, like the air before a massive thunderstorm. Every single one of my brothers in that warehouse was looking at the screen with the kind of focused, professional hatred that only warriors feel when they see a betrayal of the oath. These men were supposed to be the law, and they were talking about framing my sister like it was a routine Tuesday. That is it, I said, my voice as cold as a tombstone. We have everything we need. We have the proof of the shooting, the proof of the plant, and the proof of the conspiracy to cover it up. So, what is the move, Ghost? Jax asked, his hand drifting toward his sidearm. We going in? Not yet, I said. I want them to spend one more night in absolute terror. I want them to wake up tomorrow morning thinking they might have a chance to fix this, only to realize that the world has already moved on without them. Leo, at exactly 6 o'clock hours tomorrow, I want this footage sent to every major news network, every social media influencer, and the state attorney general's office. But before that, I want it to be the only thing playing on every screen in the police precinct. Consider it done, Leo said. I will set it on a timer. It is going to be a total nightmare fuel situation for them when they walk into work tomorrow. High key, they are going to wish they never got out of bed. I walked over to the large window of the warehouse and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my sister was still unconscious, her body trying to heal from a wound that never should have happened. The system had failed her. The people who were paid to protect her had hunted her instead. But they had made a fatal mistake. They forgot that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And in this case, the reaction was 30 Navy SEALs who were done playing by the rules of a broken system. Get some rest, everyone, I said, turning back to the team. Tomorrow we stop being ghosts. Tomorrow we become the storm. We are going to surround that precinct, and we are not leaving until every single person involved in this is in handcuffs. And if anyone tries to stop us, well, they can find out the hard way that jurisdiction does not mean much when you are facing 30 hammers. The team began to disperse, find spots on the floor to catch a few hours of sleep. They were calm. They were ready. There was no doubt in this room we were doing what we were trained to do, neutralizing a threat. Only this time, the threat was wearing a badge. I sat down and pulled out a photo of Maya. She was laughing, holding a book, looking like the world was a beautiful place. I looked at the photo, and then I looked at the dark silhouette of the city. Almost there, Maya, I whispered. Almost there. What the actual heck were they thinking? They really thought they could just delete a life? They really thought they could lie their way out of this? Not on my watch, not in this lifetime. The clock is ticking, Walters, and the glitches are only the beginning. Tomorrow, the whole world is going to watch you fall, and I'm going to be right there in the front row to see it happen. No cap. The sun began to crawl over the horizon at exactly 6 o'clock hours, bleeding a deep, bruised purple across the sky that felt incredibly appropriate for what was about to go down. My name is Marcus. I am 26 years old, and while most people my age were waking up to an annoying alarm clock and a boring commute, I was standing in a high-tech warehouse watching the digital equivalent of a nuclear bomb being dropped on a small-town police department. Leo was hunched over his consoles, his face illuminated by a ghostly blue light. He looked like he had not slept a minute, and honestly, he probably had not. "It is time, Ghost," he said, his voice crackling with a level of excitement that was honestly a little scary. The timer just hit 0. Every screen in that precinct, every digital billboard in the city center, and every major news desk in the country just received a gift-wrapped package containing the truth. We are live, and there is no undo button for this level of failure. This is straight up the end game, no cap. I leaned in to watch the live feed from our drones. At the precinct, the morning shift was just rolling in. Officers were walking through the doors with their paper cups of coffee, looking like they were ready for another day of doing absolutely nothing of value. But as soon as they stepped into the lobby, they froze. Every single monitor, the ones behind the desk, the ones in the break room, even the little television in the waiting area, was playing the raw, unedited footage of Officer Vance shooting my sister. But it was not just the video. Leo had synced the audio of Vance and Miller talking about planting the evidence. The sound of Vance's voice saying, "Grab the bag from my trunk," the special one, was blasting through the precinct's own public address system. It was glorious. It was absolute, unmitigated chaos. I watched a sergeant drop his coffee cup, the dark liquid splashing all over his polished boots as he stared at the screen in total horror. He knew. They all knew. The Brotherhood was being dismantled in high definition. What on earth is happening? I could practically hear them screaming from miles away. By 6:15, the internet had caught fire. Because Leo had sent the footage to several high-profile influencers and local activists, the video was being shared thousands of times a second. The narrative that Chief Walters had carefully crafted, the one where Maya was a dangerous suspect, was being incinerated in real time. The comment sections were a battlefield, and for once, the clown show was the only target. People were calling for resignations, for arrests, for justice. The energy was shifting from confusion to pure, unadulterated outrage. "The chief just arrived," Jack said, pointing to a different monitor. Chief Walters' black SUV pulled into his reserved spot with a screech of tires. He practically fell out of the vehicle, his face a shade of red that looked like he was about to have a total cardiac event. He ran toward the front doors, but he was stopped by a group of protesters who had already gathered, mostly young people who had seen the video on their phones and lived only blocks away. They were shouting, recording him with their own devices and blocking his path. Walters looked like a trapped animal. The man who thought he owned this town was suddenly realizing that he was just a guy in a cheap suit who had been caught in a massive lie. "He looks like he's having a really bad time," Jax remarked with a jagged, sarcastic grin. "That is a real shame. Truly heartbreaking. By the way, Marcus, the team is ready. We are geared up and waiting for the word. We are not just going to sit here and watch the movie, right?" "Negative," I said, grabbing my tactical vest. "We are moving out. Walters and Vance are going to try to run. They know the walls are closing in, and men like that always have a plan B that involves a suitcase and a fast car. We are going to make sure their only plan B is a jail cell." The 30 of us moved to the transport vans. There was no talking now. The air was filled with the metallic clack-clack of equipment being checked and the heavy thud of boots on the warehouse floor. We were not wearing our full combat gear. We did not want to look like an invading army. No, we were wearing our work clothes. Dark tactical trousers, fitted black shirts, and high-end plates hidden underneath. We looked like what we were, a professional elite force that was done playing games. As we drove toward the precinct, the atmosphere in the town had changed. It was electric. People were standing on their porches, looking at their phones, talking to their neighbors. The mask had been ripped off the city, and everyone was seeing the rot underneath. We arrived at the precinct at 7 a.m. The scene was total madness. There were at least 100 protesters now, and the local news vans were arriving, their satellite dishes unfolding like predatory insects. The police officers at the front were overwhelmed. They were trying to push people back, but they had no authority anymore. Every time an officer opened his mouth, someone would just play the audio of the plant from a megaphone. We pulled our 3 vans into the alleyway behind the station, effectively cutting off the rear exit. I jumped out first, followed by Jax and the rest of the hammers. We did not run. We walked with a slow, deliberate purpose that made the 2 officers guarding the back door freeze in their tracks. "This is a restricted area," one of them yelled, but his voice was shaking so hard it was almost comical. "You cannot be here." "Actually," I said, stepping into the light so he could see my face, "I am exactly where I need to be. I'm Marcus Harris. You might remember me from yesterday. I'm here for Vance and Walters. You can either step aside and let us do this the easy way, or you can find out why 30 Navy SEALs are currently surrounding your building. What is it going to be, buddy?" The 2 officers looked at each other, then they looked at the 30 men behind me, men who were built like tanks and had professional violence written all over their expressions. They did not even say a word. They just stepped aside and opened the door. Smart move. Honestly, it was the first intelligent thing I'd seen a cop do in this town. We entered the building through the back, moving through the hallways with a synchronized precision that was a stark contrast to the panic of the local officers. We passed the break room, where the television was still playing the footage on a loop. The officers inside just stared at us, their mouths hanging open. They did not try to stop us. They were broken. Their law and order was a lie, and they knew we were the real thing. We reached the chief's office. I did not knock. I kicked the door open with a force that made the frame splinter, the sound echoing like a thunderclap in the small room. Chief Walters was standing by his desk, stuffing files into a leather briefcase. Officer Vance was there too, looking like a man who had not slept in a week. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was clutching his service weapon like a security blanket. "What the flip is this?" Walters screamed, dropping a handful of papers. "You cannot just burst in here. This is a government building." "It is a crime scene, Walters," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "and you are the primary suspect. Put the bag down. And Vance, if you even think about touching that holster, I promise you that my friends behind me will not be as polite as I am being right now. Do not be a hero. You are not built for it." Vance looked at me, then at Jax, who was holding a suppressed rifle at low ready. Vance's hand was trembling so much he could barely keep it on his belt. He looked at the monitors on the wall, which were still playing the video of him shooting Maya. He looked like he wanted to cry. "It was an accident," Vance whimpered, his voice cracking. "She moved too fast. I was scared. You do not know what it is like out there." "You were scared of a librarian with a bag of kale?" I stepped closer, my shadow looming over him. "You are not a cop. You are a bully with a shiny piece of tin. And you, Walters, you are the one who enabled him. You thought you were so clever, deleting files and planting drugs. You thought you were the main character of this town. But you forgot one thing. Every story has an ending. And this is yours." Outside, the crowd was getting louder. The sound of their chanting was vibrating through the walls. "Justice for Maya! Justice for Maya!" Walters looked at the window, then back at me. He looked like he was searching for some legal loophole, some way to talk his way out of it. But he saw the 30 men in the hallway. He saw the drones hovering outside the glass. He saw that his world had shrunk to this one room, and there was no way out. "This is not over," Walters hissed, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than me. "I have lawyers. I have friends in high places. Your friends are already deleting your number, Walters." Leo's voice came through my earpiece. "I am currently watching your bank accounts being frozen and your high-placed contacts releasing statements condemning your actions. You are a radioactive man. No one is coming to save you. High key, you are on your own." I pulled out a pair of heavy-duty zip ties. "Hands on the desk, both of you. Now." For a second, I thought Vance might actually try something stupid. He looked at his gun, then at me. But then, he saw the look in my eyes. The look of a brother who had seen his sister's blood on a white dress. He realized that if he moved, he would not make it to the hallway. He slowly raised his hands and placed them on the desk. Walters followed suit, his shoulders slumping in total defeat. As I secured their wrists, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. But it was not the end. Not yet. We still had to get them out of the building and through the crowd to the federal marshals who were waiting at the edge of town. "Jax, clear a path," I said. "We are walking them out the front door. I want everyone to see them. I want the world to see what happens when the system finally has to answer for its crimes." "Copy that, Ghost," Jax said, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Let us give the people what they want. It is showtime." What on earth were they thinking? They really thought they could just shoot an innocent girl and keep their jobs? They really thought the main character was on their side? Not on my watch. Not in this lifetime. The reckoning is here, and it is going to be televised. The air in Chief Walters' office was so thick with tension you could have cut it with a tactical knife. My name is Marcus, I am 26 years old, and I was currently standing over two men who had spent their entire careers thinking they were the apex predators of this town, only to realize they were actually just bottom feeders caught in a very large, very high-definition net. The zip ties clicked into place around their wrists with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid closing. "Get up," I said, my voice as cold and flat as a winter morning in the mountains. I didn't say it loud, but the authority behind it made Officer Vance jump like he had been struck by lightning. Vance was a total mess. He was 42 years old, but right now he looked like a toddler who had been caught drawing on the walls with permanent marker. His tough guy facade had completely evaporated, replaced by a layer of greasy sweat and a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Chief Walters was different. He was still trying to maintain some dignity, but his hands were shaking so hard that his expensive gold watch was rattling against his skin. It was the most satisfying thing I had seen in a long time, for real. "You are making a massive mistake, Harris," Walters hissed, though he didn't dare look me in the eye. "The federal government does not take kindly to people playing soldier in a police precinct. You think you are a hero? You are just a vigilante. This is going to end very badly for you." "That is adorable, Chief," I replied, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him toward the door. "But here is the thing. I am not playing soldier. I am a professional doing a job that you were too corrupt to do yourself. And by the way, the federal marshals are already waiting at the edge of town. I am not the one who needs to worry about how this ends. You are. Now move your feet before I decide to make this walk a lot less comfortable for you." Jax stepped out into the hallway first, his suppressed rifle at a low-ready position. He looked like a literal shadow, a dark silhouette of impending justice. "Hallway is clear, Ghost," he said into his comms. "The rest of the brothers in blue are currently hiding in their offices like they are waiting for a storm to pass. It is a total ghost town in here. Let us get it." We started the walk. It was the longest hallway in the world, or at least it felt that way. Every step our boots took on that polished linoleum echoed like a drumbeat. We passed the open door of the break room, and I saw a group of 4 officers standing there, clutching their coffee mugs like they were holy relics. They didn't move. They didn't even look at us. They kept their eyes glued to the floor, probably wondering if their own search histories were currently being downloaded by Leo. Look at them, Jax muttered as we passed the squad room. The brave defenders of the peace. They only grow a backbone when they are staring at someone with a broken tail light. Put them in front of 30 Navy SEALs and suddenly they are the quietest people on the planet. The audacity is honestly off the charts. We reached the lobby. The sound from outside was no longer just a dull roar. It was a physical force. It was the sound of thousands of people who had seen the video, heard the audio, and were done being quiet. Justice for Maya, lock them up, no more lies. The chanting was so rhythmic it felt like the building itself was breathing. I looked at the front doors, heavy glass and steel that were currently being rattled by the crowd outside. Through the glass, I could see the sea of faces, the flickering lights of a dozen news cameras, and the red and blue strobes of the state police who had finally arrived to try and maintain some semblance of order. "Are you ready for your close-up, Vance?" I asked, leaning in close to the officer's ear. He didn't answer. He just let out a small, pathetic whimper. "What was that?" "I couldn't hear you over the sound of your career dying. Do not worry, I'm sure you will have plenty of time to practice your sad face in front of a judge." "Jax, open the doors," I ordered. Jax pushed the bars, and the doors swung open. The sound hit us like a sonic boom. The wall of noise was almost enough to push us back, but we didn't flinch. We stepped out into the blinding Florida sun, the humidity hitting my face like a wet towel. For a split second, there was a gasp from the crowd, a sudden realization that the men they were screaming for were actually being let out in disgrace. And then the roar became deafening. Cameras were everywhere. Microphones were being thrust toward us, and the air was filled with the frantic shouting of reporters trying to get a quote. "Chief Walters, did you order the evidence to be planted? Officer Vance, do you have anything to say to Maya Harris's family? Who are these men in tactical gear? Are you with the military?" We didn't say a word. We moved in a tight diamond formation with Walters and Vance in the center. My brothers, 30 of the most elite operators in the world, formed a human wall that no one could penetrate. We were like a black tide moving through a sea of chaos. I saw some of the local officers trying to act like they were still in charge, pushing through the crowd with their batons out, but when they saw the look in our eyes, they backed off. They knew. They realized that we were the main characters today, and they were just extras in a movie that was ending in their total defeat. "Check the flank. Miller is on the move." Leo's voice crackled in my ear. I looked to my left and saw Officer Miller, the partner who had stood by while Maya was shot. He was trying to slip away through a side exit, his head down, wearing a civilian jacket over his uniform. He thought he was being clever. He thought he could just fade into the background. "Not today, Miller," I yelled over the crowd. I nodded to two of my guys, Caleb and Stone. They broke formation with a speed that was almost impossible to follow, weaving through the crowd like predators through tall grass. In 10 seconds, they had Miller by the collar of his jacket, dragging him back toward our group. "I didn't do anything," Miller screamed, his voice high and shrill. "I just watched. I didn't pull the trigger. Vance told me I had to help him. I was just following orders." "The following orders defense went out of style about 80 years ago, buddy," Caleb said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he slapped a pair of zip ties on Miller's wrists. "Welcome to the party. You were about to miss the group photo." We now had all three of them, the shooter, the accomplice, and the architect. We continued the walk down the main street, heading toward the courthouse square where the federal marshals had set up their checkpoint. The crowd was following us, a massive living organism fueled by righteous anger. People were holding up their phones, live streaming the whole thing. This wasn't just a local arrest, this was a global event. The clown show was being exposed in 4K, and there was nowhere for them to hide. As we reached the center of the square, 3 blacked-out SUVs with federal plates pulled up. A man in a sharp suit with a U.S. Marshal windbreaker stepped out. He was about 50, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and eyes that had seen every kind of criminal there was. He looked at me, then at the 30 men standing around me, and then at the 3 broken police officers in zip ties. "I am Deputy Marshal Rhodes," he said, his voice barely audible over the shouting, but somehow carrying a weight that demanded attention. "I take it these are the individuals mentioned in the digital evidence package we received this morning?" "They are," I said, handing over the briefcase I had taken from Walter's office. "In here you will find the paper trail for the kickbacks, the original logs for the server deletions, and the files Walters was trying to burn. And here," I pointed to the 3 men, "is the trash that needs to be taken out. Officer Vance shot an innocent woman and planted drugs. Officer Miller helped him. And Chief Walters covered the whole thing up." Rhodes looked at Walters, then at Vance. He didn't look angry, he looked disgusted. "It is a dark day for the badge when men like you wear it," he said quietly. He turned to his team. "Load them up. Secure the evidence. I want a full sweep of that precinct by noon. No one leaves that building until we have talked to every single person on the payroll." As the marshals began to load Walters, Vance, and Miller into the SUVs, I saw Vance look back at me one last time. There was no defiance left in him. He looked like he was finally realizing that his small-town kingdom was gone forever. He was going to a place where his badge wouldn't mean a thing, and where the people he would be staying with wouldn't be very impressed by his tough guy stories. "Hey, Vance," I called out as they closed the door of the SUV. He looked up. "Maya woke up an hour ago. She's going to live, and she's going to watch every single second of your trial from the front row. How does that feel for a split-second decision?" The door slammed shut, cutting off whatever pathetic response he might have had. The SUVs pulled away, escorted by state police moving through the cheering crowd. The sound was like a physical wave of relief. The weight that had been hanging over this town for years was finally lifting. I stood there in the middle of the square, surrounded by my brothers. We were sweating, we were tired, and we were covered in the dust of a town that had almost broken my family. But we had done it. We had taken a broken system and forced it to look at its own reflection. "Is it over, Ghost?" Jax asked, pulling off his headset and wiping the sweat from his brow. "The tactical part is over," I said, looking up at the courthouse. "But the healing is just starting. We did what we came to do. We protected our own. Not going to lie, that was the most intense morning of my life." Leo's voice came through the comms. "I am currently watching the news. Every single channel is playing the footage. The governor just released a statement calling for a complete overhaul of the county police department. You did it, Marcus. You really did it. High-key, this is a legendary move." I looked at the crowd, at the people who were still hugging each other and crying with joy. I realized that this wasn't just about my sister anymore. It was about every person who had ever been bullied by someone with a badge, every person who had been lied to by the people in power. We had given them a win. We had shown them that sometimes the main character isn't a politician or a celebrity. It is just someone who refuses to let a lie stand. "Let us get out of here," I said to the team. "We have a hospital to get to. I think Maya wants to see some familiar faces." As we walked back toward our transport vans, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a text from my dad. "She is talking, Marcus. She asked for you. She said she knew you would come home. I love you, son." I felt a lump in my throat that I couldn't swallow. I didn't care about the news or the legendary move or the fact that we had just dismantled a police department. I only cared about that one sentence. I walked faster, my boots hitting the pavement with a new kind of energy. What the actual world were they thinking? They thought they could just delete a life and move on? They thought a badge was a shield against the truth? Not on my watch? Not as long as I have 30 brothers and a reason to fight? The sun was high in the sky now, and for the first time in my life, the heat didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a new day.